Oh, to be a refugee. Would you label me greedy or needy if I asked for something beyond survival? If I could ask for some place where I could play the tunes of my homeland, where I could play for I want to be free, where I could play the scenes of my daydreams, where I could play the mediator, the moderator, the master who teaches lessons and teaches at schools beyond the mountains, or the master who skillfully weaves from the threads of their homeland the fabric of refuge, or the master who's able to dictate and tell the difference between wrong and right. I take no dictation, I give none, but what I do take are colors. Colors of the trees as they burned in war, colors that we bled, colors of my homeland, for this land sometimes feels gray and bleak. But this is my homeland, for I was born here and raised here. Maybe not born here, but raised here. Maybe neither born here nor raised here, but I felt safe here, but I felt like I lived here. Hi, I'm Saleema, and my project is titled Khwendo, which is the Dari language word for sister's home. It's a placemaking project. Whoops, slides are quite. Can we restart the presentation? Okay. It's a placemaking, learning, and opportunity center for Afghan refugee women living in the slums of Karachi. Yeah. Okay. So it's a place-making project for Afghan refugee women by capturing the essence of a hujra. I'd briefly explain what a hujra is. A hujra is a place reserved for the Afghan men in its culture, where the men come together, share their sorrow, their joy, they learn, they teach. However, there is no female alternative for this space. Another idea that I was dealing with was the idea of home. Granted that COVID cooped us all in our homes, a lot of people questioned what home was. And for many, that definition was blur. They felt placeless. And who else feels more placeless than a refugee? Coming from a refugee family myself, I tried to understand their plight. And after 43 years of hosting Afghan refugees in Pakistan, this place has become like informal settlements instead of those camps. So to understand the plights of the refugee, literature helped guide me to understand this inescapable urge of forever being somewhere and belonging, and that is the phenomenology of place-making, which is a key theme for my project. In the case of Karachi's Afghan Basti, which is the only UN-recognized Afghan camp, however, due to its location on the outskirts of the city, it is in the most deplorable condition, with only 2 empty plots available. As I went to the site and my field visits, I posed one question to everyone: what does home mean to you? The men talked about safety, refuge, lack of fear, and the women, they called it Jahannam, which means hell. It's really unfortunate to see that in an already marginalized group of Afghan refugees, there's a further more vulnerable group, that is the Afghan refugee women. In a basti that appears to be ungoverned, the movement and the growth of its women was restricted and governed. So I wanted to empower the women. They became my primary user. And the easiest way to empower someone is through economic empowerment. I studied the existing economic patterns of women in the Afghan basti. So they worked in small cottage industries, as community response workers, as traditional crafts worker teachers, and I decided to exploit that and derive my program through it. Of course, in order to make a female-centric space, I had to study the female movement patterns in the basti, and I realized that most of the women existed in this market, the textile market, also known as the Muhajir market. as you can see over here. However, the bazaar and the streets, they became this hujra. The men had taken over, and there was no space left for women. There's also the scrap market. The scrap market is somewhere where we could also source building materials for. Pedestrian movements and vehicular movement helped me understand that wherever there was vehicles, there were no women's, which caused the streets to become extremely gendered. Further literature helped me understand how proximity, spatial organization, and spatial agency empowers people. Hence, spatial agency was one of the core ideas that I also worked with. Appropriation of spaces and participation in construction and design of the user helps them create this ownership of the space. And so the two key ideas were phenomenology of placemaking and participatory design. To understand the spaces that the women were already comfortable with, I tried to study the spatial climate of the Basti. I see there's a lot of open spaces, but all of these open spaces are enclosed within their houses, creating these introverted spaces, while the materials used are mud sourced from the nearby riverbed. And so, as we know, spatial appropriation is important, but also programmatic appropriation is important. So I tried to create these intangible cultural connections and tangible cultural heritage. So this hujra for women is essentially a socializing space, a support space, a learning and a teaching space, while through traditional Afghan carpet weaving and culinary and gastronomy in a soup kitchen is how the women will come together and connect with one another. So my site that I picked out was essentially located centrally within the Basti, near the existing women's market, so ease of accessibility, and its presence next to an Eidgah, a male-only prayer space, this women-only space, subtly challenges the social norms. My 0.6-acre site is also present next to a 12-feet-high cut cliff, which allowed me to play with the contextual geometry. Because it's participatory design, I made maquettes and took them to the site. I asked my women, what do they want? They steered clear away from the linearity. They wanted soft, sinuous forms that were feminine and something that would stand out as comparison to what was already existing in the site. So I already talked about the idea of sinuous forms. Closed-loop circulation was important because it helped us in achieving these increasing chance encounters, creating this sense of familiarity. Interconnected open spaces is important because that's the kind of typology that women are used to. And then framing stories and narratives through circulation. So now there's a lot of walkways. With only 30% of my site built, I created these walkways around the site, and they were covered because of the sunny nature of the city. But the framing through the soft arches essentially helped frame the stories and the narrative that were being built. So when you're approaching the site from here, you see this soft kind of like boundary wall that wraps around and turns into a planter. This is also the primary buffer for our site, so that there's a smoother transition from public to private space as we move inwards. And we also see over here that this wall kind of turns around and turns into this bread shop or naan shop. Essentially, a naan shop that we see present over here is because women said their access to the naan or the bread was restricted by men. So this is a space by the women, for the women. We see that the wall kind of like juts out slightly, inviting you into this portal. This entrance is also very strategically located towards the lane that takes you to the textile market. And so as you stand at the first portal, it frames the second portal, almost inviting you on the inside. And in between the two, we have the secondary buffer present. The secondary buffer that's present over here on one side, we see there's fruit tree groves of fruits, of fig and mulberry, which reminds you of Afghanistan, which reminds them of home. And on the other side, we see this children's play area, because you cannot empower women without including their children into the scheme. In terms of materiality, the mud from the nearby riverbed will be used, and the women will make these stabilized hollow earth blocks in themselves so that they're part of the construction. As you peer towards the side, you kind of see that the structure appears to be floating. The reason why I've done that is, the way I've done this is that I've raise the form on pilates, push the pilates back. This makes the space appear more magical, whimsical, because this is their own private little secluded space. And this also helps tackle the waterlogging problem that is in the area because of the lack of sewage systems. We see that this portal kind of invites us in. And if we go back, you also see the specifically designed breezolays with integrated planters. These breezolays provide view towards the inside, view towards the outside, but not inside, while also letting the wind enter into the space. So as you're into this scheme, the portal kind of turns around and it tucks you away. And it makes the Afghan woman feel safer as she moves through the dance of these arched walkways, and she takes her burqa off, because now she's in a space that's her own to claim, and takes takeoff. As she's moving towards these framed trees over here, she finds herself into the central artery, or the central thoroughfare, which connects all of the functions together. This central artery has a plain blank white wall that they can use as a mural wall and use all the paints and all the colors that they want to paint their heart's desires. We also see this arched walkway with the underside painted pink, which is like a very subtle nod towards femininity. Besides that, we also see this water channel that runs alongside this central walkway. This is a reminder to the baghs, or the gardens in Afghanistan, that were modeled after heavens. Granted that I talked about the women thought of this space as hell, the reminder of heaven is something that's extremely important in this space. Right off the bat, our first function is the counselor's room. So as we see the counselor's room, the wall kind of tucks in and creates this cocoon where you can sit and wait for your counselor to call you in. This is the counselor's room, and this is the waiting area for it. And the other function is the fun part of the scheme. So this is the open-air theater. So this is where the hujra's entertainment aspect comes in. So you can entertain yourselves. The frames kind of like frame the stories and the narratives. But this could also be a flexible space used for teaching. We can also see the way the columns kind of turn around and create these interesting sitting spaces. And then towards this side of the scheme, you see the soup kitchen. The soup kitchen is supplemented by this terraced vegetable garden, which further continues onto the back side of the plot, which acts as a rainwater buffer from the cut cliff that's present behind. And as I spoke about the presence of kids, so here's the children's playing area, and here's the dining hall, so that the kids can easily access the dining hall and have maybe their only proper meal of their day with the comfort of their own mother in their own space. Then, of course, you have the carpet making facility, which is the primary bread earner for the women. And from here, you kind of like access the service entrance and the storage in the warehouse. And then these terrace steps essentially provide you a space for all the functions like dyeing, drying, cleaning your wool out. And then further, there's this hall, this empty flexible hall, in which you can sit and weave your carpet, and you can actually embroidery. But because I wanted to give women this kind of control over how they occupy the space, this space can also be used for something else. Maybe they don't feel like making carpets, they can use this empty hall as something else. Another layer of flexibility and control is that if they don't feel like using this hall for carpet making, they can sit out in this stepped courtyard where they can see their children running around, and they can see them playing. They're sitting by this, the sound of the waterfall, and they can sit on the steps and embroidery and weave. And the final layer of the flexibility is how the space transforms itself. So by the daytime, they're making carpets, and at the nighttime, it becomes a space of festival. So the women can celebrate Nowruz, Eid, or multiple functions like that. And so the reset button is pressed, where the women have questioned the status quo. This sinuous roof form almost becomes symbolic of the whales flying away into the wind as the women dance to the rhythm of their own heartbeat. Thank you.